Hi, I'm Sue Zago. I'll be talking about legal research for international criminal law for BuzzShear's International Criminal Law Seminar online for spring 2014. International criminal law, as you know, focuses on issues relating to extradition, cybercrime, terrorism, organized crime and narcotics, human rights, and war crimes under international law. International criminal law often intersects with other areas of international law, especially humanitarian law, which addresses human rights in wartime. There are some really wonderful resources here that help you define what international criminal law is and how it intersects with other areas. The Peace Palace Library has a great definition and a brief history, and I've linked it here. As a quick review, international law is broken up into three portions: public international law, private international law, and customary international law. So here, public international law is the relationship between national governments, often involving a treaty. It can also mean the relationship between intergovernmental organizations, and some examples of those are NATO, United Nations, European Union, and for international crime, Interpol. They are often created by a treaty and involve two or more nations that work in good faith on issues of common interest. Private international law governs the choice of law when there are conflicts in the state's law relating to a private transaction. This often happens in trade, but can happen in other topics as well, like contracts, marriage and divorce, jurisdiction, recognition of judgments, child adoption, and child abduction. Customary international law is essentially the general and consistent practice of states regarding a sense of legal obligation. It exists independent of a treaty and is often used to fill gaps where treaties overlap. I've given you several definitions on this slide, as well as a great explanation and a research guide from GlobalX that I think will help you further define what customary law is. Here in Article 38 of the International Court of Justice, there is a list of the sources of international law in the order and weight of their authority. This is pretty much common for most international law, and it's really great that it's documented in this particular treaty. The first and most important are the treaties themselves, the actual agreements between countries. The next in order of weight are the international customs. The third is the practice of law recognized by civilized nations, and the fourth are the judicial decisions or cases, and then expert teachings of scholars. The first three sources are primary sources, while judicial definitions and teachings of the most highly qualified publicists are treated as secondary sources. So it's a little bit of a flip from the U.S. system. So what is a treaty? Here I've given you some links on the definition and summary of how treaties are negotiated in the U.S. Essentially, a treaty is a formal written agreement between sovereign states or between states and international organizations. The process in the United States is conducted through the executive branch, or mainly the Department of State. Once the negotiators have accepted the terms of the treaty, the President sends the treaty to the U.S. Senate for its advice and consent. If the Senate agrees that the President should ratify the treaty, it goes back to him and he ratifies it with his signature. In the U.S., treaties where the U.S. is a party have some special designations. So treaties are considered legislation, same status as federal legislation, and federal annotated codes are a great place to start looking for this kind of stuff. But there's a distinction between treaty and agreement. In the U.S., the word treaty is reserved for agreements that are made with the advice and consent of the Senate under the Constitution. So Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Agreements that are not submitted to the Senate are known as executive agreements. Regardless as to which one, whatever it's called, convention, agreement, protocol, if it is submitted to the Senate for advice and consent, it is considered a treaty under U.S. law. And note that under international law, both types of agreements are considered binding. Before you even start your research, you need to think about what you're going to be doing. What are you going to need to find? I have this list here of some things that can get you started. So background, law of an individual country, definitely look for the text of an applicable treaty as well as all of the information that goes with it. Status, reservations, is it in force? Who are the parties to the treaty? Is the U.S. a party? It all helps to define your research. Take a look at non-governmental or intergovernmental organizations and their publications. They may help a lot. Take a look at case law in tribunals and international cases, and some domestic cases sometimes can be helpful. And then you need to figure out how to keep up to date. We'll talk about that in the next slides. So here we really talk about planning. You need to understand your topic scope and the main issues, and you want to identify the sub-issues that you really need to stay away from as tangents. Try and stay focused. Use a secondary source to find your primary sources. There are some really wonderful ones out there, including books, but also websites and research guides. Make sure you get your bearings and make a plan. Brainstorm your topic. Brainstorm your keywords. Figure out what you need to do first. What can be grouped together or chunked. And then leverage what you know. Identify items that you've just found, and can those items, if really analyzed, tell you more about the topic or lead you down other pathways? Background research is always a great step. Here you're going to identify what your topic really is, how deep it is, how broad it is, or how narrow it is. You can also help to put a personal face on your topic with background research by finding anecdotes and other stories. So here are some ideas. Using treatises or other scholarly works. Look at the UN or other international organizations. Look for law review articles, non-law periodicals, and large news gathering organizations that cover international events. Don't discount the law review articles. They're available for you full text, Lexis, Westlaw, and Hein Online. They often give you a history and background of the treaty and possibly the topic. They deal with current events and other hot topics. And they also cite to every source. And so it's a lot easier to find a treaty with a citation than without. Here are some examples of good starting points. A research guide and your online catalog. Both of them are pretty easy to find, and they can provide some really great opportunities for you to understand the process of your particular topic, as well as learn about more materials that can help to either find the full text of the treaty or add additional commentary. When looking for a treaty, it's always a good idea to look at the national law of one of the parties of the treaty. Here we're going to assume that the United States is a party to a particular treaty. We're going to then look at the national law, which means looking at the federal statutes. In order to do that, we're going to use an annotated federal statute, either the USCA or the USCS. The reason why, they're more current than the USC, and they provide us with really great annotations. So that's reference to other materials like treatises, law review articles, encyclopedias, regulations, case law, and other statutes. When you're finding the text of a treaty, here are some questions to ask. Who are the parties? Is it a UN treaty? When was it signed? They'll all point you in the direction of where you need to look. Depending on some of your answers, you may need to look in different areas in order to find the text of a treaty. I've identified some good treaty collections here that are available for free on the web, as well as in some proprietary databases like Hein Online. Once you find the full text of the treaty, you'll need to figure out what the status is. As I've identified some tools here, including the UN Treaty Collection, Status of Multilateral Treaties deposited with the Secretary General, the Department of State webpage. They'll all help you identify what the status, whether or not a treaty has been ratified, and whether countries have made reservations. As you know from a previous slide, decisions of international and national tribunals can be used as persuasive authority. It's really helpful to look at individual tribunals in order to get case law, and very often they're going to be publishing um, multiple documents, and sometimes they do video as well. ACIL, the American Association of International Law, has a great website here that I've linked to that can help you identify some of those tribunals and other adjudicatory bodies. Once you've found your basic documents, it's important to keep up with your topic. Very often a report will be issued or statistics will be uncovered or there's a new case that comes up that you'll really want to know about. And so here are some particular tools that may be able to help you. This is just scratching the surface. There's an awful lot more out there. So if you have any questions, by all means, please send me an email and I'll be happy to talk with you. My name is, again, Sue Zago. I'm here at the UNH Law Library. You can reach me by email at sue.zago@law.unh.edu. Thank you so much.